Okay. Have you ever wondered if a joke from a sitcom could actually be true? Like, scientifically proven? It sounds like a total stretch, right? But today, we're digging into a phenomenon that did exactly that. It literally leaped from a TV script straight into the pages of a psychology journal.
Yep, it all started with this guy, Barney Stinson from How I Met Your Mother. He had this theory he called the cheerleader effect, and the idea was pretty simple. People, he said, look way hotter in a group than they do by themselves. Now, his specific explanation was, well, it was very Barney. But the basic idea, that's what we're talking about.
And look, it's a hilarious line in a show, right? But it actually got a couple of researchers, Drew Walker and Edward Vull, thinking. They were like, wait a minute, is there something real going on here? Could this just be a weird, predictable glitch in how our brains perceive faces? So, you know what they did? They decided to put it to the test.
All right, so before we jump into exactly what they found in their experiments, we got to understand the theory behind it, because this isn't just about who you hang out with. Nope, this is about the deep, fundamental way your brain actually sees a crowd of people.
So the whole theory really boils down to 3 simple steps. First, you see a group of faces. Easy enough. Second, and this happens in a split second, your brain calculates an average face for the whole group. It's like a mental composite sketch. And third, and this is the kicker, your brain then sees each individual face as being a little bit more like that average. It kind of pulls everyone towards the middle.
Now, there's a fancy scientific name for this mental shortcut. It's called ensemble coding. And honestly, your brain is doing this constantly. Think about it. If you look at a bunch of dots on a screen, you don't have to measure each one to get a feel for their average size, right? You just know. Well, the theory is that our brains do the exact same thing with faces. It just averages them all out automatically.
Okay, so our brains create this average face. Who cares, right? Well, here's where it gets really interesting. For decades, study after study has shown something wild. We humans consistently find average faces to be more attractive. I mean, a face that's a digital composite of 100 different faces is almost always rated as more beautiful than the real individual faces that went into it. Weird, but true.
And that right there is the final piece of the puzzle. Your brain creates this average face, which we're hardwired to find attractive. Then it makes each person in the group look a little more like that attractive average. So being in a group basically smooths over your unique features, or as the researchers put it, your unattractive idiosyncrasies. Ouch.
So the theory sounds pretty solid, right? It makes sense. But is it actually true? Well, Walker and Vull weren't just going to leave it as a theory. They designed 5 different experiments to find out for sure.
For most of these experiments, the setup was pretty simple. They had people look at hundreds of different faces and rate how attractive they were. But here's the clever part. Every single face was shown twice, once all by itself and once in a group photo. Then, all the scientists had to do was compare the scores for the exact same face. Did the group really make a difference?
All right, experiment number 1. They went right back to the original sitcom joke and decided to test it using only photos of women.
And boom, the results were in. The exact same female faces were rated, on average, 5.5% more attractive when they were in a group photo. Now, that might not sound like a huge number, but statistically, it's significant. It was real. The cheerleader effect was a thing, at least for women.
But what about guys? Was Barney right that this was just a thing with women? For experiment 2, they did the exact same test but with men's faces. And you know what they found? The result was practically identical. Men's faces were rated 5.6% more attractive in a group. So, nope, this isn't about gender, this is just a human brain thing.
Okay, but any good scientist is also a good skeptic, right? So the researchers basically started playing Mythbusters on their own discovery. They thought, okay, could something else be causing this? So they designed the next few experiments specifically to rule out other possible explanations.
Myth number 1. Maybe it's just about how long people look at the photos. You know, maybe they spend more time on group shots and that bumps up the score. So for experiment 3, they made sure people spent the exact same amount of time looking at the solo pics and the group pics. The result? The cheerleader effect was still there. So that theory busted.
All right, on to the next one. Theory number 2. Maybe it's not about averaging faces at all. Maybe it's just the social vibe of a real photo. You see people hanging out together, you think, oh, they must be friends, and that makes them seem more attractive. To test that, experiment 4 stripped away all the social context. No real photos, just faces arranged in cold, computer-generated grids. And just look at the data here. It's totally clear. The faces shown all by themselves got the lowest ratings. Every single group, whether it was a grid of 4, 9, or 16 faces, scored higher. Even in this totally artificial setup, the effect was still there. So that social context theory? Yeah, that one's busted too.
So, time for one last test. The researchers had this clever idea. They thought, okay, if this whole thing is really about our brains leaning on the group average, what if we make the individual faces harder to see? Maybe that would force the brain to rely on the average even more and make the effect even stronger. And how do you make faces harder to see? You blur.
So, for this experiment, people saw 4 different kinds of pictures: a normal group photo, a normal portrait, a blurry group photo, and a blurry portrait. The whole idea was to see if making things fuzzy would push the brain to lean on that averaging trick even harder.
Now, the result here was a little more complicated. The cheerleader effect definitely still worked. It was present in both the clear and the blurry photos. But, and this is the interesting part, blurring the images didn't really make the effect any stronger. So what does that tell us? It tells us the effect is super robust, it's hard to get rid of, but it's not as simple as the less you see, the more you average.
Okay, so after 5 experiments, let's step back. What's the bottom line here? What does all this mean for you and me?
The verdict is in. The cheerleader effect is absolutely real. Barney Stinson, of all people, was right. Now, maybe not about the whole sled dogs thing, but his basic idea? It totally holds up under a microscope. On average, people just look better in a group.
And you gotta love this part. The researchers themselves couldn't help but have a little fun with it. In their actual scientific paper, they wrote that, quote, having a few wingmen, or wingwomen, may indeed be a good dating strategy. I mean, how great is that? Scientifically speaking, your friends' faces literally help average out your own, making everybody look a little bit better.
So there you have it. A joke from a sitcom ends up revealing this pretty deep truth about how we see the world. We don't just see individuals in a vacuum. Our brains are constantly, automatically averaging people out against the group they're in. It's a powerful reminder that context is everything, which leaves you with one final question to think about the next time you're about to post a group photo.